In January 2010, an earthquake devastated Haiti, this island nation in the Caribbean. It lost 200,000 people. The tragic images moved world leaders. They sent aid to rebuild the country. The US alone donated $1.3 billion, but only a fraction of this money reached Haiti. Surveys show that NGOs in this country received just 0.9% of the aid disbursed. Where did the rest of the money go? It stayed within the United States. Most of it went to private firms. It's not clear how they spent the money or if it left the US at all. The result is this. Haiti continues to struggle. 100,000 people remain internally displaced. Most of them are still in refugee camps. The infrastructure is in a shambles. Public services have hardly improved. And stories like these make you wonder, where does aid money really go? The billions of dollars that NGOs receive, the funds that governments set aside for the poor, the relief packages that world bodies promise, how exactly is all of this spent? Does the money even reach the intended recipients? Or is it lost in distribution? Hello and welcome to Gravitas Plus. I'm Palki Sharma, and this may sound offensive, but humanitarian aid has become a bit of a farce. Besides generating publicity for the donors, besides helping countries enhance their soft power and perhaps helping world bodies sell some merchandise, what impact does it have? Most of the aid does not even reach the people it's meant for. And there's data to support this. Audits have shown that 1/5 of foreign aid never leaves donor countries. It either remains in their banks or is given to their NGOs and not to those who need it. And before I give you examples, let me say this here. We're in no way trying to undermine the work done by NGOs or humanitarian bodies. Some of them have contributed significantly. They do provide life-saving assistance. They do help reduce the impact of crises on communities. The aim of this report is to question governments and global bodies that have turned aid into a business model, a model that benefits their own interests more than the recipients. In 2011, developed countries raised $100 billion in funds. This was foreign aid to be given to the developing world, $100 billion. Out of this, $22 billion were never transferred. The same year, Italy raised $2 billion, but only $300 million of this left the country. The rest remained in Italy. In 2019, another report was released. It said 25% of aid never leaves donor countries. And the remaining 75% does not reach the recipients directly. It passes through several agencies. Each agency takes a cut, and with each cut, there's lesser accountability. Why does all of this happen? To understand that, we'll have to understand the very concept of aid. You see, international aid is not a lump sum amount. It's a bundle of a wide range of things. Some of it is money, some of it is food, some of it is debt relief, and some of it is people. That's the cost of consultants and staff who provide technical assistance. And as important as these expenditures may be, they don't result in the transfer of resources. Take the case of Timor-Leste. It's a country in Southeast Asia. It became independent in the year 1999. Since then, it has received over $5 billion in aid. Out of this, $2 billion has been spent on the UN mission alone. Bilateral donor projects have cost around $1.7 billion. UN staff get salaries 10 times more than locals here. For instance, a UN employee from Australia is paid $200,000, and this is in a country where 50% of the population makes less than $2 a day. Do you get the point? International aid is not entirely what it seems. Only a trickle of what's promised gets transferred as aid. Some of it is exhausted by the agencies providing aid. Some of it reaches the recipient countries but immediately bounces back to the donors, to the pockets of the very people who promised aid. How does that happen? Thanks to a concept called tied aid. Let me explain. What they do is tie the loans to companies within donor countries. So if America is the donor, for instance, the loans are tied to American companies. And the result is this. These companies then decide how the money is spent. I'll show you more numbers. In 2012, more than 14% of bilateral aid was tied. In 2017, it was more than 15%. In 2018, it grew to over 19%. Which are the donors that tie aid? Almost all of them. The US tops the list. In 2018, almost 40% of bilateral aid was tied. That's approximately $11 billion. Japan tied over 22% of $4.2 billion. Germany tied almost 15% or $3.1 billion. And South Korea tied more than 48% of its aid. Basically, all these countries promised aid, but instead of giving it to recipient countries, they gave the money to their own companies. So the aid money is, first of all, furthering their own economic interests. A few years back, this report was released. It said Britain's foreign aid budget had created a group of poverty barons, private players who were filling their pockets in the name of helping disadvantaged people. In fact, the department which was given the task was itself found to be splurging aid money, the Department of International Development, DFID. This was a British government agency for foreign aid. In 2012, an investigation revealed that this agency had spent 20 million euros on five-star hotels, 6 million euros on a university studying mental health, 3.9 million euros on a think tank studying elections in Africa, and 400,000 euros on furniture at its new branch in India. What about aid for development? Only a fragment of that money went to African nations. And why just Britain? Almost every developed nation has such stories. Only a small part of the aid they promise is spent on welfare or development. Most of it is spent on setting up offices and brainstorming on how to offer help. The rest goes to developing nations as grants or concessional loans. Sometimes it is provided in the form of debt relief, which basically leaves the money in the hands of leaders and not people. In 2011, Congo was promised $7.5 billion in financial aid. More than $5 billion from this was never given. This was kept aside as debt relief to be given when needed. Then we have global bodies like the UNICEF, a UN-sponsored charity with a great reputation. Look at their record. Case in point is Zambia. In 2014, UNICEF decided to help Zambia solve a challenge, fixing the country's school curriculum, helping it revise textbooks. How did UNICEF make a difference? It gave 78 motorbikes to Zambia's Ministry of Education. What for? To improve monitoring of educational standards in rural areas. Now, were all these 78 bikes used for the same purpose? Or did they go to friends of ministers for personal use? UNICEF did not appoint someone to check. And this is not a case against UNICEF again. They're doing some good work. We're talking about distribution loss of aid and how international agencies have misplaced priorities. In 2015, aid organization World Vision released this ad, 100,000 reasons to love the Super Bowl, America's biggest sporting event. What were the 100,000 reasons? 100,000 t-shirts of the losing team in Super Bowl. They were manufactured for distribution in case the team won, but it lost. So the unsold merchandise made its way to Zambia, Armenia, and Nicaragua. The organization sold it as a generous gesture, as life-changing aid to children in need. Children, which it said, had never seen something brand new. Each t-shirt cost $20. That's $2 million in all. Wouldn't this money in some other form have helped more? Super Bowl t-shirts worth $2 million were not Zambia's top requirement, but they got them anyway. My point is quite simple. Aid seems to have become a continuation of colonialism. Instead of fighting inequality and eradicating poverty, it has become a lucrative medium for some in the West to expand their business. More than helping the poor, it is driven by political considerations and vested interests. Some countries don't even hesitate in hiding this fact. Like the United States of America, time and again, several US State Department officials have admitted that they consider aid a tool of US foreign policy, a means to advance American economic interests, a means to secure new markets for America, and establish governments that suit Washington's interests. And this undermines the very concept of aid. It's not a noble deed to help those in need. It's a business model where any benefits to the poor are incidental.